If a letter from the DWP arrives with the words Migration Notice on it, do not put it in the pile to deal with later. I want to be completely clear about why, because this is one of the very few situations where a genuine, hard deadline really is involved, not manufactured urgency for the sake of a headline. Now, I want to be precise about who this actually affects, because it isn't every single pensioner watching this. If you're already settled, receiving the state pension and pension credit, this particular deadline doesn't apply to you. But if you or a partner are of state pension age and you're still receiving tax credits, or you're claiming housing benefit on its own, without pension credit alongside it, this affects you directly, and it's worth listening carefully. Here's the situation in one sentence. All tax credits in this country stopped completely on the 1st of April this year. If you were still receiving them, you should have been sent a letter asking you to claim either universal credit or pension credit instead. That letter gives you exactly 3 months from its date to make that claim. Not 3 months from today, 3 months from the date printed on your specific letter. Miss it, and your old benefit simply ends, along with something called transitional protection, which exists specifically to stop you being worse off during this change. I'm going to explain exactly what that letter means, why the 3-month window matters so much, and what to actually do if you've got one of these letters sitting on your side table right now. If this is useful, hit like before we continue, because there's a real chance someone you know has one of these letters waiting, unopened, right now. Let's get into it properly. Let's start with why this is happening at all, because understanding the background makes the actual deadline much easier to take seriously. Tax credits, which used to be administered by HMRC rather than the DWP, are being phased out entirely, replaced by universal credit for working-age households and by pension credit for those who've reached state pension age. This has been happening gradually, region by region, group by group, for a few years now, but the final hard cut-off point for all tax credits was the 1st of April this year. After that date, tax credits simply don't exist as a benefit anymore, for anyone, regardless of age. Here's where it specifically involves pensioners. If you're of state pension age, or part of a couple where at least one of you is, and you are still receiving tax credits, you fall into a specific group the DWP calls pension age households on legacy benefits. Depending on exactly what you are claiming, the letter you receive asks you to do one of two different things. If you are receiving working tax credit, you're generally asked to claim universal credit even though you're over state pension age, because of how that particular benefit is structured. If you are receiving child tax credit at pension age, you're generally asked to claim pension credit instead. This distinction matters, so it's genuinely worth reading your own letter carefully, rather than assuming which one applies to you based on what a friend or neighbour was told. Now, the letter itself is called a migration notice, and it will state, printed clearly, exactly which benefit you're being asked to claim, and exactly what date your personal deadline falls on. This is not the same date for everyone. It depends entirely on when your specific letter was issued, which is why 3 months from today is meaningless, and 3 months from the date on your own letter is the number that actually matters for you. Let's talk about what happens if that deadline passes without you claiming. Your existing benefit, whether that's tax credits still limping along in some transitional sense or housing benefit claimed on its own, simply stops. But there's a second, quieter loss that matters just as much, called transitional protection. This exists specifically to make sure that if your old benefit was worth more than what universal credit or pension credit would give you under their own rules, you don't lose out during the switch. It's essentially a top-up, calculated once, at the point you claim, that makes up the difference. But that protection only applies if you claim by your deadline. If you claim afterwards, even by a single day past the cut-off in the worst case, you can lose entitlement to that top-up entirely, meaning you could end up receiving noticeably less each month than you were getting before, purely because of timing, not because of your actual circumstances. Now, there is a small amount of genuine breathing room worth knowing about, so this doesn't feel more frightening than it needs to be. If you miss your deadline, but still claim within one further month afterwards, you can, in many cases, still be treated as having claimed on time and still receive that transitional top-up. This isn't a guarantee, and it isn't something to deliberately rely on. But it does mean that if you're a few days or a couple of weeks past your deadline and you're worried you've already lost everything, it's still absolutely worth claiming immediately, rather than assuming there's no point. If you genuinely cannot make your claim in time, for whatever reason, illness, being away, simply needing more time to gather paperwork, you can contact the relevant service and ask for an extension before your deadline passes. This has to be requested, ideally at least a week before your deadline, rather than discovered as an option after the date has already gone. Asking for more time before the deadline is a completely reasonable, normal thing to do. Letting the deadline pass silently and hoping it sorts itself out is not. Now, here's something worth knowing if you're specifically very close to reaching state pension age yourself, because there's a nuance here that's caused genuine confusion, including among DWP call handlers themselves, based on cases people have reported. If you're within a few months of reaching state pension age when a migration notice arrives, it's worth asking specifically whether you should be exempt from being migrated to universal credit at all, since moving briefly onto universal credit shortly before becoming eligible for pension credit can create unnecessary complication. This is genuinely a grey area in places, and if your own timing looks like this, it's worth getting advice from Citizens Advice or Age UK specifically about your situation, rather than assuming the general 3-month rule applies exactly the same way it would for someone with years left before pension age. Let's talk about what to actually do if you've got one of these letters right now, sitting unopened or half-read. First, find the actual deadline date printed on it and write it down somewhere separate and obvious, because that specific date matters more than anything else in this whole video. Second, check which benefit you're being asked to claim, universal credit or pension credit, since the process and the outcome are genuinely different between the two. Third, before you claim anything, make sure your existing tax credits or housing benefit award is as accurate and up-to-date as it can be, because your transitional protection is calculated based on what you were entitled to immediately beforehand. So getting that baseline right first genuinely protects the amount you'll be topped up to. And fourth, if anything about your letter is confusing or you're not sure which benefit applies to you, contact Citizens Advice's Help to Claim service or Age UK before your deadline, not after, because getting advice before you claim is considerably more useful than trying to unpick a mistake afterwards. I want to finish by being honest about something, because I think it matters more than anything else in this video. This is one of the few areas in this entire space where the phrase "act now or lose out" is genuinely, literally true, not exaggerated for effect. Most of what I cover on this channel is about entitlements sitting there quietly, waiting to be claimed whenever you're ready. This is different. This one has a real, fixed, personal deadline, printed on an actual letter, and missing it has a real, immediate financial consequence, not a missed opportunity you can simply come back to later. So if you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. If a letter from the DWP arrives and the words migration notice appear on it, don't set it aside. Find the date. Understand which benefit it's asking you to claim, and if you're at all unsure, get advice before that date arrives, not after. If this helped, share it with anyone you know who might still be receiving tax credits or housing benefit at pension age, because there's a genuine chance one of these letters is sitting on their side table right now too. Subscribe if you want more of this, plain English, checked against the real rules, and I'll see you in the next one.